Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode is brought to you by the nonprofit I founded, the Center for Global Initiatives. The Center is an all-volunteer organization, so there are no salaries, and thus all tax-deductible donations can go to the work. While our key country partner is in Tanzania, our work is global and generally focused in the areas of education and healthcare. We also help others to get their nonprofits started or augment others' project-based initiatives. It's our goal to open-source humanitarian intervention and to help make it easier for others to do more good in the world. We are proud to have been ranked a great nonprofit every year since 2011 and to have achieved a platinum-level rating by GuideStar. Links in this episode's show notes will take you to published articles on our outcomes, a number of helpful tools, and downloadable resources, which are all free, always. Please visit us at centerforglobalinitiatives.org and be sure to watch our video at patreon.com/Dr. Chris Stout to learn more. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout. You've likely seen moments of peak performance. Perhaps an athlete plays a perfect game, or a business that has a quarter with a once-in-a-lifetime profit. Perhaps you've experienced something similar yourself, playing a musical piece perfectly, making a faultless shot, or perhaps acing a final. But these moments are often elusive, and for every amazing day, we may have 100 ordinary or even unsatisfying days. Now imagine your best day at work. You exceed the goals set for you, your interactions with coworkers are productive and bristle-free, the new system you implemented has boosted productivity company-wide, and you leave the office feeling on top of the world rather than crushed under the weight of it. What if your best day could be every day? Fulfillment, or living a life in full, doesn't come from isolated peak experiences, but rather from many consistent good days. While achieving this kind of flow might seem a rarefied, elusive occurrence, what if it was possible for individuals and teams to consistently work at peak performance levels while avoiding burnout and maintaining balance? This is something that Dr. Daniel Goleman knows a lot about. Along with Dr. Cary Cherniss, they have written Optimal: How to Sustain Personal and Organizational Excellence Every Day, which discusses how emotional intelligence can help us have a great day, any day, or said another way, to consistently work at our optimal level. Daniel Goleman is a renowned psychologist, author, and science journalist. For 12 years, he wrote at the New York Times, reporting on the brain and behavioral sciences. His 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, was on the New York Times bestseller list for a year and a half, was a bestseller in numerous countries, is in print worldwide in 40 languages, and has sold over 6 million copies. Daniel attended Amherst College, graduating magna cum laude, and he also attended UC Berkeley through Amherst's Independent Scholar Program. He went on to earn a PhD in clinical psychology at Harvard University. He had a predoctoral fellowship from Harvard and a postdoctoral grant from the Social Science Research Council, and then used them to study in India. He then returned as a visiting lecturer at Harvard. In 1993, Daniel co-founded the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning at Yale University's Child Studies Center, and then moved to the University of Illinois at Chicago. A frequent speaker on campuses and to businesses, he has worked with organizations around the globe, examining the way social and emotional competencies impact the bottom line. Daniel is ranked as one of the top 10 most influential business thinkers by the Wall Street Journal, and his articles in the Harvard Business Review are among the most frequently requested reprints. He's won a number of awards, including the Harvard Business Review McKinsey Award for Best Article of the Year, and Harvard's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences has awarded him with its Centennial Medallion. Currently, he co-directs the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations at Rutgers University, and he serves on the board of the Mind and Life Institute. Daniel, it's great to have you on the show.
Chris, thank you. That was a very thorough.
Good. Well, I hope I have all my facts straight because I really do. I have just long been a fan of your work, also as a psychologist. So it's really a treat for me to have you on the show, and really an honor. And just a shout out and tip of the hat to our mutual friend William Green for connecting us and putting us together.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm delighted to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've done a great deal, but perhaps we could start with the concept of emotional intelligence. It's really kind of one of the hallmarks that you're best known for, and certainly popular with your writings. For those that may not know, could you walk us through a brief summary of how emotional intelligence is different than general intelligence, or what we might know as IQ?
Sure. They actually operate in different parts of the brain. IQ is pretty much a neocortical, top of the brain, thinking brain ability, and it's of course very important, particularly important in school. It's a best predictor while you're in school of your income lifetime because it predicts what kind of profession you can get in, whether you get an MBA, for example, or an MD, or become a lawyer. However, once you're in a career, let's say you're an engineer, it turns out that your IQ doesn't really predict anymore. It's now your emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence are things like your self-awareness, how you manage your emotions, how you empathize and tune into other people, and how you put that all together to have effective relationships. And it turns out that set of skills becomes more and more important over the course of your career. You'll never hear this in school, but I'm telling you it's true. There's a study I just saw recently about engineers asked to rate other engineers for their effectiveness as engineers. And it turned out IQ didn't predict the effectiveness at all. It was emotional intelligence that predicts whether you're going to be effective as an engineer.
I'll be
And
darned.
Sums it up.
It's really interesting, too, to see that, because from my experience in readings about it, it really does cut across all disciplines, and not just, I know it gets focused on a lot in work life, but also in personal life, too. Can you make mention of that?
Well, consider this. Would you want a mate or a lover who had no empathy?
Easy question, Daniel.
I mean, you people who are emotionally clueless are not people that we want as our coworkers, as our boss, as our romantic partner. It just is a turnoff.
As a parent, I have two adult children now, and it seemed to me, again, as a psychologist parent, and my wife's also a clinical psychologist, that when our kids were young, it seemed like there was not just our kids, but like in toddler ages, that there was a great deal of empathy. That there was a caring if someone got hurt, if someone was crying, if there's almost like a sixth sense of those children kind of perceiving something not being quite right with one of their classmates or cohorts or playmates. So is it sort of like an innate human kind of characteristic? Is it something that is present in most of us, or varies like other kinds of skills, or how does it come about?
Well, I think like any human ability, it's a combination of nature and nurture. There's, we're all born with, say, set points for various neurotransmitters that will predict, for example, how outgoing we are or how introverted. But in addition to that, and interacting with it, is how we're raised or what our life experience tells us. And so, for example, when I was at Harvard, there was a professor named Jerome Kagan, a developmental psychologist, who did studies of kids who were shy. And what he found was that if you evaluate a kid at 4 who's shy, some turn out to be shy, at 14, and some are not. And the difference is how their parents relate to them. If the parent, encourages a kid who's a little inhibited to go ahead and try the new food or the new playmate, they'll go ahead and have fun or have a good time. And that's a different learning than parents who say, well, she's shy, so we won't try to force her to do that or encourage her to do that.
I see. Gotcha. So, what about as adults? Is it something that, I know it's sort of like an innate thing vis-a-vis IQ. I mean, you can certainly study and you can certainly have grit and ways to, augment or work around, if there's deficits or even learning disabilities. But is it something that, after a certain set point that there might be just incremental benefit to it? Or what, if someone feels like this is something that they wanted to develop, is it, has the train left the station by a certain age, or is it always something that we can work on and improve?
I think the good news about emotional intelligence is that it's learned and learnable at any age. And so, for example, companies will offer courses in emotional intelligence for their employees, regardless of their age. So I don't think that, unlike IQ, which pretty much doesn't change over the course of life, emotional intelligence is quite plastic, quite improvable, if you will. So it has to do with the question of, are you motivated? Do you really care? That's the crucial point.
Gotcha. Well, let's maybe use this as a springboard and think about emotional intelligence as foundational to your new book that I want to spend some time with you talking about. So again, it's called Optimal: How to Sustain Personal and Organizational Excellence Every Day. Before we dive into it, I just want to share a couple of reviews of what some other people have had to say about it. Mark Benioff, probably familiar to a lot of listeners on this show, chair and CEO of Salesforce, said, "In an age of AI and machine intelligence, emotional intelligence is more important than ever for building a company culture that brings out the best in people and drives success. Anyone leading a team or organization should read Optimal. It will open your mind and show you the inner balance and skill set that we all need to face the future." And Oscar Munoz, former CEO of United Airlines and also the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller Turnaround Time, said, "Powerful and deeply researched, Optimal offers actionable tools and insights that are essential to unlocking your potential, achieving stable success over time, and building high-performing teams while cultivating the most important leadership quality of all, emotional intelligence. From now on, when I see a copy of this outstanding book on someone's desk, their stock will have risen in my eyes." So, well-deserved praise, Daniel. So, I know you've written at least over 13 other books, and they've kind of varied in topic and domain, but what brought you and Cary to write Optimal?
Well, Cary Cherniss and I were co-directors of a consortium for research on emotional intelligence. We started it actually a little bit before my book, Emotional Intelligence, came out. When that book was first published, the idea was new. I had seen in 1990 an article called Emotional Intelligence, written by Peter Salovey. He's now president of Yale, and his then graduate student, John Mayer. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. You can be intelligent about emotions. So I used it as a frame for my book. And we were justifiably criticized in the early years because there was very little direct research on emotional intelligence. It was a brand new concept. And Chris, as a psychologist, it takes some time to plan a study, get funded, and do the study, publish the study. So, decades later, Cary and I have been able to harvest a critical mass of very strong research showing that emotional intelligence, in fact, does do the things we had a hunch it might do, which is to make people more effective in their lives, in their work, to make leaders more effective, and teams operate better. And that's why we wrote the book Optimal.
That's great. I think it's almost become kind of common parlance for people talking about, optimizing certain kinds of things, their morning routines or certain more healthy habits or exercise or what have you. In the book, you suggest that being optimal is really a more realistic and attainable goal than what Macaulay Csikszentmihalyi has written about in Flow. And that serves actually as a better framework for achieving peak performance. Could you elaborate on what your thoughts are around that, in particular vis-a-vis the context of emotional intelligence?
Of course. So the research on the optimal state actually comes from Harvard Business School, where they asked hundreds of men and women to keep journals of their feelings and events of their workday. and there's a composite of a best day at work where you're completely engrossed in what you're doing. You feel really good and satisfied. You're productive. You're creative. You feel good, and you're connected with the people around you. That's kind of an optimal state. The flow is on that spectrum, but it's an extreme. The group at the University of Chicago who did the study, and I want to congratulate you on knowing how to pronounce Csikszentmihalyi.
Thank you. Big fan of
It was
his work too.
research, but they began by asking people in all sorts of callings, neurosurgeons, basketball players, ballerinas, tell us about a time you outdid yourself when you were absolutely shocked by how well you did, and it's your best, all-time best. And the problem with flow is it happens to you. You can't make it happen. It's like grace, it falls out of the sky. So we felt it was more realistic to go a little notch below that, where you're still at your best, you're really performing well, but you can get into that state voluntarily. You can make it happen. And one of the most powerful ways to make it happen is simply to pay full attention to what you're doing right now. Chris, today people are more distracted than ever. About a century ago, T.S. Eliot had a line in a poem I love: distracted from distraction by distraction. I mean, that's how we live our lives. That's what our phones are all about. All of our distractions are there. I think there's a premium now on the simple ability to concentrate on what's important to you at the moment. And research at Harvard found that people are distracted about 50% of the time, up to 90% at work. So I think that being able to decide, I'm going to put aside distractions and become fully engaged and engrossed and concentrated on what's important to me at the moment. I think there's a premium on that now.
Well, and two, there have been other authors that have written articles and as well as titled books around deep work and being able to get into that. Is that a variation or a component of the optimal state?
I think that many people are familiar with the optimal state. It's no doubt been written about in many different ways, in many different frameworks. We found interestingly, that emotional intelligence in people and in their bosses tends to promote that optimal state. And I think that's very important. So I looked at it through a lens of emotional intelligence, as we do in the book, and we found that being able to be emotionally self-aware and to manage your emotions well and to tune into other people well is a good formula for encouraging that state. And it's not that we can guarantee it, but we can think it's going to be more likely.
And so that makes me think, so let me check this out with you. So in the context of let's keep it in the workplace. So interacting with coworkers, interacting with supervisors, leaders, founders, etc., that kind of expressing ourselves in that way creates an environment or a space where those, our collaborators, our bosses, etc., may respond back to us in a similar way over time, and kind of creating that space to be able to do that. The psychological safety I've heard you talk about as well too, around that. Am I getting that straight?
Well, that's interesting. That how you are may affect how your boss relates to you. That seems to be what you're applying, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something else going on, but I think that too.
Okay.
Let me tell you what I think is going on here. I've given talks around the world where I started by asking business audiences to think of a boss they loved and a boss they hated, and to tell me one quality of each of those. And when you list the qualities of the boss people love, they're emotionally intelligent, they're available, they're empathic, they don't blow up at people, they handle their own emotions. And the boss they hate is exactly the opposite of that. And so I think that having a boss you like is very important. But also, the Serenity Prayer, Reinhold Niebuhr's that makes a distinction between that in my life that I can change and that which I have to adapt to, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't guarantee that your boss is going to be one you love, but that doesn't mean that your boss has to control your inner life, that you can be able to manage your emotions despite whatever's going on at work. And it may not be your boss. Maybe your boss is great, but all kinds of directives come up from higher up in organizations that create problems lower down,
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of organizational life. So today's obstacle, today's problem is a new challenge, but how you meet that challenge is up to you and the state you're in.
Gotcha. So, for the intellectual aspect of choosing a frame of how to feel that, I mean, that's also sounds very cognitive behaviorally oriented, where we can, not feel so affected by others, but, we choose how, to interpret something or what have you. Is that also then another facet of maybe a tool for developing emotional intelligence, or where might those kinds of techniques fit in with this?
It's interesting that you bring up cognitive behavioral therapy. My wife is a cognitive therapist. She was trained in a kind of psychodynamic model of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, Aaron Beck, the late Aaron Beck, was a genius really in developing cognitive therapy.
Right.
And, he developed it at a time when I was covering this for the New York Times. And a lot of therapists didn't like the fact that cognitive therapy seemed to work in empirical studies. And other therapies didn't necessarily do so well.
Uh-huh.
And cognitive therapy is very important because it tells us, for example, we don't have to believe our thoughts. Not every thought. Some thoughts don't help us. They may lead us to mess ourselves up. So it's a very powerful way to work with emotional disorders like depression or chronic anxiety. And I think it might also be a good method for helping you stay in an stay in an optimal state. I also recommend mindfulness, like mindfulness of the breath, which is like a mental gym. Basically, it's attention training. Every time you bring your focus to your breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, and then notice when your mind wandered and then bring it back to the breath, that's a moment of mindfulness. And I think that strengthens the circuitry for attention. It's like going to the gym for physically, every rep of a weight you're lifting strengthens that muscle just that much more. And I think the same thing happens in the brain, and it makes you more able to focus and concentrate on whatever you want, which I think is another doorway into the optimal state.
Got you. So, in the context of then self-awareness, are there certain kinds of examples that people might think about this in terms of applying it in their social relationships and their work with others, vis-a-vis moving toward an optimal state?
Well, I think that emotional self-awareness matters immensely for how you manage yourself. And I think if you add empathy, it matters enormously for how well your relationships go. So the first part, self-management, take, for example, being in a chronically stressful job situation. Sadly, too many people are. If you realize that you're being stressed out constantly, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're worried about work, for example, it's a sign that you may be heading toward burnout. You may be getting emotional exhaustion, which comes from unremitting stress. And, our bodies are designed to have that fight or flight response when there's an emergency, not every day, all the time. And in fact, the body wants to have a recovery period, a time, it's the difference between sympathetic nervous system arousal, that's the fight or flight, or parasympathetic, which is the recovery mode. So I really advocate scheduling daily recovery activity, whatever it may be for you. Maybe it's playing with your pet or walking in nature or yoga or meditation, whatever it is. make time for it, because it looks like you could say, oh, that's a waste of time. It's not. It's helping your body restore itself so you can go back into the fray. That's a strategy for self-management under stress. And then you brought up the relationship question, which I think um, requires both self-awareness and empathy, tuning into the people around you. And here, I want to say there are three kinds of empathy: cognitive empathy, how the person thinks about things, language they use to themselves. That's what AI does, by the way, does it very well. Emotional empathy, which is feeling what the other person feels, resonating with them. That's different, very different, in a different part of the brain. And then finally, there's empathic concern, which means you not only know how the person thinks and feels, but you care about them. And that's like a parent's love for a child. And I think it shows up in every relationship, caring about the welfare of the other person. So uh, the self-awareness helps you manage yourself, so you don't relate to someone out of distress or out of anger or some out of proportion emotion. You can manage your own emotional affairs. And then the second is tuning into them to see where they are and to be there for them, whether it's a workmate or just a friend or family.
I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's sort of like the a couple of cliched things with that of, put your oxygen mask on first, and then you have the ability to then be of help to others. I think a lot of times people get so frenetic with whatever it is that's stressing them out that that then they become short with others, and
That's
then
exactly true.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then it's a cascade of negative things that follow that. It reminds me too, when you were saying that, of like making the time, and I'm recalling Stephen Covey's point of the time to sharpen your saw, that the person was too busy driving to stop to get gas, and that it's so hard for us, I think, when we're in these kind of stressful, frenetic, whatever work situations, life situations, stressful situations, to be able to say, yeah, I need to do self-care. That will be my fuel. That will help me function better. That will help me not damage a relationship inadvertently, etc. So moving from the interpersonal and maybe familial to more about organizations, because I feel like a lot of your book is very helpful in terms of some leadership skill development and stuff. In the book, you talk about organizational citizenship, which was a new phrase for me. I liked that. And you talk about becoming a good organizational citizen. Can you explain what you mean by that and how someone would go about achieving that?
Yeah, well, Chris, there actually is a measure of organizational citizenship, and it means this: your job has a particular description. Your duties are this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
But a good organizational citizen looks around at the people around you and sees ways to help them out that go beyond your job description. It's that simple. Do you do things to help other people that isn't part of what you're being paid for? That you have an office party, you help clean up. Someone needs help. They're under a tight deadline, and you could do a little to help them out. You take the time to do that, to offer help. It's that simple, and it creates enormous emotional glue. People appreciate it fantastically. It makes a difference. A lot of trust gets formed there, and it strengthens any relationship.
That's great. I would imagine too, just from a social psychology perspective, there might also be some reciprocity that goes into that, and as well as role modeling. People seeing those kinds of things, and hopefully they get recognized by other colleagues, and would certainly be a boost to people's careers, and probably just even to themselves. To feel good about that, and that to look forward to being at work and having those kinds of opportunities. In the book, you also talk about, I had mentioned leadership, but you give some really great stories that sort of exemplify some of the more theoretical kinds of concepts around emotional intelligence being used by leaders. Could you share a few of those with the time that we have?
Well, I think I want to start out by saying, in our research, we found that organizations that bring in emotional intelligence do it more effectively if someone on the business side says this matter.
Hmm.
HR, people unfortunately too often get sent to a HR program because someone thinks they need help with X, Y, or Z. It's much, much better if someone who knows how the business operates says, you know what, this is going to be a competitive advantage. We need to boost our emotional intelligence. So I would say that for one, it takes someone on the business side, and they really need to mean it. One of the stories that Cary Cherniss, my co-author, tells, he was asked to go to a company and do some development of emotional intelligence, and the CEO of the company came, and he did that and stayed, by the way, through the whole session, which meant a lot to everyone there. They could see it mattered to him. Another time he went to a company and the CEO came, said how important this was, and then he left. It was a very different message.
Exactly.
So there needs to be a leader that shows it really matters. One of the people who impressed me the most was a guy named John Murphy, who was the head of Progressive. We know it as Progressive Insurance, but it's now called just Progressive. Their CRM division, customer relation management, that was all of the agents who sold insurance. And it was a big profit center for the company. And it did very, very well under his direction. And he was a champion of emotional intelligence. He said, hey, we're in a relationship business. This is all about relationships. And, the vast majority of his heads of regional divisions and agents themselves took courses in emotional intelligence because it mattered. They saw that it mattered. And they did very, very well under his direction. And then at Amazon Web Services, this is interesting. There's a guy there, Rich Waugh, who calls himself an emotional intelligence evangelist. And he's doing a grassroots emotional intelligence, not like John Murphy was the director of the division, head of the division. Rich is an engineer who is now, he has hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are inspired by him to bring emotional intelligence to their part of the company. So that's a kind of a grassroots, ground up way of bringing it in. And he's another favorite of mine.
That's great. I also want to just say it really kind of brings the concept alive to be able to read these kinds of stories. I'll tell you one that resonated with me was the person that was the New York City bus driver. And it's sort of, because a lot of times, like again, I'm full of cliches today, like thinking about the what's said about the janitor at NASA. What's your job description? Is like, my job's to get a man in space, a person in space. And I felt that same kind of vibe with that, with Govan Jovan Brown, I think is the name of
Goleman Brown.
Yeah.
So this is the guy. Can I tell the story?
Please. Yeah. Queuing you up.
So I started the book, Emotional Intelligence, by talking about him because I was so impressed. I was on a bus in New York City on a hot, humid August day, and people don't want to talk to anybody. You're in a mood.
Right.
And I get on the bus, and the bus driver is very cheery. He looks at me, he says, how's your day been? Like he really meant it. And then as I was sitting on the bus, I realized he's talking to everybody on the bus. We're looking for suits. This department store on the left has this great sale. Or did you hear about the movies and the Cineplex on the right? And I like the one in Cinema 3, on and on like that. People get off that bus and he transformed their mood from grumpy to, really pleased. And he'd say, well, I hope you have a wonderful day. And they greeted him back that way too. And years later, I happened to find out about him because he had an obit in the New York Times. His name was Govan Brown. He had fans. People would wait for his bus. He got 3,000 letters of commendation, not one complaint over the course of his career. He was the pastor of a church in Long Island, and he saw the people on his bus as part of his flock.
Wow.
He was tending to his flock. And it really mattered. And he had a purpose that was larger than just driving a bus in New York, which is not a great job. It's very stressful and hard to do. And he didn't mind it. He was doing something else. And I think that we've done some research on what you call purposefulness, feeling a strong sense of purpose no matter what you're doing. And it makes things go better too.
That so resonates with me. That's so neat to hear the other kinds of aspects with that, with his background. I just was fortunate to be invited to do a commencement address, and I talked a lot about purpose. And doing some of my research, I found that you may already know this too, but for listeners, that the government of Japan sees having a life purpose as such an important factor that now it's part of their Ministry of Health's public health initiatives and things. So I think, being in an optimal state and, a sense of purpose are kind of, maybe the yin and the yang of each other. I mean, I see both of them, being feeding to and supporting the other.
Chris, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, research on well-being, for example, Carol Reef at the University of Wisconsin shows that a sense of purpose is part of the formula for feeling well. I know the research now doesn't look just at how long you live, but how long you live healthily. It's called health span. And, the health span is increased when you have something like a sense of purpose in your life. It brings meaning to whatever you're doing. And somehow it helps health too. We don't know how, but it's one of those magical ingredients.
Yeah. I have a 95-year-old uncle who just recently stopped farming. Still lives on the farm, lives independently, as sharp as a tack. He and I have conversations every month about what's going on in the world, and he is generally more and better well-informed than I am, and he could probably do twice as many push-ups as I could, too. And I think part of that, too, is just his being in nature, like we talked about earlier, and self-care kinds of aspects, but also having a sense of purpose with what it is to still be sort of the caretaker of the farm as it is today, to be a father and grandfather of his girls and his granddaughters, and those kinds of things, however it is we define as purpose and as having those kinds of drives and strengths, I think are really part of what you and I would call, and others, as an optimal life. I want to be conscious and respectful of your time. I know you've got a hard stop, and we've kind of covered a variety of different kinds of areas, but are there other things that you would like to share before we wrap up vis-a-vis emotional intelligence, living in an optimal kind of performance way, or anything like that, Daniel?
Well, yes. When we were talking about organizations, there's a key point that I hadn't been able to mention before, and that's this, that an organization that wants to be emotionally intelligent would also bring this into performance reviews. Too many people are driven or drive others, their leaders, to get results. We're worried about the quarter and what we're, how we're going to do in our stock price. But if you stress people out to get those results, you also burn them out. However, if you inspire them, if you talk about a shared sense of meaning or purpose that moves that person too, as a driver of performance, you get the same results, but in a better way. And so in a performance review, it's not just did you get your results, but how did you get those results? Did you do it in a way that's going to, hollow out human capital? Best people will leave if they can. Or did you do it in a way that people feel they love their job? And how well people do their job depends to a great extent on how well they love it. And the relationship with their direct boss makes a big difference. So I think anyone has a sphere of influence. We all do. The people in our lives, the people perhaps at work, our family. And what do we bring to that sphere? Is it a sense of purpose? Is it like your uncle? Is it being in control or managing ourselves well? And are we empathic? Are we tuning into people? That's emotional intelligence.
I love that. How do the people that get off our bus, Daniel, feel after they've gone for a ride?
Well put.
Yeah. So, well, you are one of the busiest people in the world that I know. What's next? What's on the horizon? What's cooking?
Oh, I'm going to do a change of pace book. I'm doing something. Oh, I should mention this. My wife and I are doing a series of workshops based on her work, particularly Emotional Alchemy, her
Ah,
book, which integrates mindfulness and cognitive therapy. I think you'd like it, Chris. I don't know if you've seen it, but we're doing workshops, two-thirds based on her work, one-third on mine.
wow.
Uh, those are coming up this fall.
Great. Well, we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. And speaking of that, that tees us up nicely for what are some ways for people to learn more about your work, your wife's work, to connect, to
Sure.
get a hold of your books? Where can we route people?
Well, the books are available everywhere, but I want to alert people to the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence course. Um, the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence course, which is online, and it will help you become much more familiar with emotional intelligence and to master the elements of it and the competencies that make people outstanding performers. It's a one word, Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence. That should be in show notes,
Okay.
as well as the URL for the course my wife and I are about to give. And I think that's about it.
Okay, good. Well, for people that might be driving or running or exercising while they're listening to this, just check out our show notes. We'll have all those links and they can go directly to that. So, Daniel, you and I behind the scenes went through a lot to be able to make this happen, and I am so happy we did. Thank you so much for taking the time. I have so enjoyed it, and I just personally want to say again, you have served as an inspiration and a role model for me in my career as a psychologist, and I am deeply indebted to the work that you have done and the work that you're doing. You bring so much to the world, and my heartfelt thanks.
Chris, I want to go right back to you and say thank you. I also saw how resilient you are because we had a lot of stress and getting a good connection here. I want to thank you for your good work.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to keeping in touch with all this. This episode was also brought to you by Young Automotive, a partner and sponsor of our 2024 Racing to Help Others project. They're a second-generation auto service provider based in Sturgeon Bay and serving customers throughout Door County, Wisconsin. They are recognized as a trusted, community-minded, locally owned business. In fact, their motto is changing lives by fixing cars. Their ASE certified technicians are experts in servicing domestic, European, and Asian vehicles, along with hybrids. They are MAP accredited and an ASA member. Cal's expertise in preparing the C8 for the racing season has made all the difference, both in the car's on-the-track performance and my peace of mind as the driver. Owner Fred Young and service manager Nick Kruger's backgrounds, experience, and automotive knowledge are without compare. Their commitment to helping others is a testament to their ethics and the shop's ethos. Fred's leadership in developing a positive, diverse, and supportive workplace culture serves as a model for other entrepreneurs to aspire to. And on a personal note, I want to share my heartfelt thanks and deep appreciation for all they do, and to our collaboration in helping others wherever we can. Visit their website at youngautomotive.net and be sure to check out the stories on their YouTube channel at Young Automotive Inc. Sturgeon Bay. You won't be disappointed. Thanks. Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website, A Life in Full, for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and subscribe on your favorite platform. And as for the obligatory disclaimer, this podcast is for general information uses only and does not constitute the practice of psychology, medicine, nutrition, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical or psychological advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I take conflicts of interest seriously. For all of my disclosures as well as show notes, please see livingalifeinfull.org/podcast and my LinkedIn profile. Thanks, and until next time.